Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back from the ad break. You're still watching Prime Life. Now, this evening, let's welcome Dr. Carel-Piet van Eeden, a holistic life counselor, a herbalist who specializes in attention deficit disorder. Now, Dr. van Eeden's passion for empowering those with ADD shines through in his groundbreaking book, which is called The Superhero Spectrum, now which explores the unique strengths and potential of those living with ADHD through imaginative storytelling and practical advice. Now, this is a conversation that I'm really, really interested in. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Carel-Piet van Eeden, on Prime Live. Welcome and good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome. Can you please tell us more about ADHD Help as an organization?
So ADHD Help is basically the practice that I run where we try and focus on helping not just children but also adults who are struggling with brain expressions and with what other people would classically call then ADD or ADHD. We focus on helping people uh, find the challenges in the brain and then optimize their brain function rather than giving them a clinical diagnosis and giving them a little box that they can climb into and feel sorry for themselves.
Mm. And how did you come to develop the concept titled The Superhero Spectrum?
Superhero spectrum came from within the practice where people would say, "Now, I want to share the information that we get during a consultation. Our consults, the first consult, is a whole hour and a half of explanation, and superhero spectrum is basically what we would run through with a full consultation and just explain all the heroes and the villains and just looking at the brain in a different way than just putting a script towards the patient.
Mm. And can you tell us, what inspired the approach to, making sure that people that are living with ADHD are understood and, they are also celebrated with their unique traits?
I have very, very strong ADHD myself, and so it's a personal journey that took me into this, and I didn't want other people to have to go through the same challenges that I went through. So what we did with Superhero Spectrum and the practice itself is then we wanted people to understand what is going on in their brain rather than just saying, "I shame, there's something wrong with me." And from within that understanding, we then wanted people to move forward and make practical changes to their lives rather than just swallowing one or two pills and saying, "Well, this is it."
Mm. And I want us to just talk about ADHD as, a whole, because a lot of people quite name people, to say, oh, this person has ADHD because of, I don't know, they just saw them maybe unable to focus on one thing or whatever it is, because we often just name it without understanding exactly the meaning of ADHD. So, as a doctor, can you take us through exactly what happens mentally to someone that is living with ADHD?
Sure. So there are different ways of looking at the brain. In my practice as a herbalist, I don't do the traditional clinical ADD versus ADHD
Mm-hmm.
and combination type. We actually see that there are seven expressions of the brain when we look at neurodiversity. Now, this is work done by Dr. Daniel Amen, who's a psychiatrist in America, and he does these very fancy brain scans called SPECT scans,
Mm-hmm.
and he has isolated these seven different expressions. Now, depending on what combination of these seven types you have, you might struggle with something like dopamine. Now, the way that I explain these neurotransmitters that we struggle with is we have Joburg water running some of our neurotransmitter reserves. And that means that sometimes we have a bit of a leaky reservoir of this neurotransmitter, which then means that my brain selectively releases it. And only certain things will make me feel happy. Only certain things will make me feel good about myself if we look at something like dopamine. And then there are all these characters that you can see now, or some of them, who contribute to these brain expressions. So when we look at somebody who is working with ADD, or who's facing whatever neurodiversity they are, um, it boils down to oftentimes a tired brain, and a brain that needs a different form of stimulation to be able to get the energy to perform on the same level that other people's brains would perform. But in saying that, there's also the whole thing with superhero spectrum is that every one of these 7 brain expressions also has a powerful superpower. So they will, it's not just doom and gloom. And that's why we focus on making your strength stronger and making those weaknesses less.
And I want us to talk about, early detection signs, because I think it's very important to be understood. And a lot of people might be living with people that have ADHD, or children, from a very young age, and you might not know as a parent, or, as a friend or colleague or whatever it is, on how to, detect or understand when someone is living with ADHD. So now, can you give us maybe like the earliest the signs that one might look for them to know that, no, this is actually something serious that I need to take care of, or it's not just me losing focus or whatever it is?
So for me, one of the big things is procrastination. The need for somebody to continuously tell you, hey, focus, stop dreaming, stop talking in class, get ready for school. Um, I draw the picture that it's, if I don't have the lion that roars in my face, I can't perform. And that is oftentimes linked to low energy in the prefrontal cortex, where structure, discipline, and focus reside. So my brain says that, oh, I can't get energy normally. I need to move into my emergency energy reserves, and that is adrenaline. I can only release adrenaline if there's a lion roaring at me. And that is one of the quickest things or biggest things that I look for is procrastination, where I need pressure to perform. So that's number one. And then, of course, is the daydreaming, excessive daydreaming, not being able to focus on tasks. Um, it might be very small for some people. For many people, it might not necessarily be a challenge. And that's where we would rather focus on optimizing the brain. And I think every single human being on this planet can do with some optimization. Um, and we must just move away from this thing of it's a disease that needs to be fixed.
I mean, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, in the book, you also introduce a variety of, unique ADHD superheroes. How did you develop these characters and the stories around them?
So I am an eternal child at heart. So it just came naturally for me to create them in ways that people can understand. Um, I like cartoons. I trained as a business analyst before I went into medicine. So translating things into options that are more tangible for people is something that's a big passion of mine. And it's much easier to say there is a villain called Gleach, rather than saying there was a study done on a cohort of 16 students in Sweden, and half were fed this, half was fed that. That you lose people along that way. But talking about Gleach as an almost an entity keeps both the children as well as their parents and the adults more invested and involved in these sessions.
That is so interesting. And what do you hope readers, can get or benefit from this book, especially parents and caregivers, who might be living with children or who have ADHD?
ADD, ADHD are genetic expressions. It's not going to go away. We learn how to live with it. In most cases, it's not something that you will go on a 3 year detox and then it's gone. Uh, so an understanding of how the brain works, even up to a genetic level, to me is really important, because how can I expect a client or a patient to make decisions about the rest of their lives if they don't understand. And that's what the book is for, is to allow people to actually understand their brains, or give them enough understanding to perhaps go deeper into things rather than just saying, swallow this because I say so.
Mm, mm. And I mean, in your work, you also advocate for holistic approach for ADHD, encompassing not just the traditional medicine, but also lifestyle changes and natural, remedies. Could you maybe explain a bit on how, this holistic approach differs from the conventional treatments and why you believe is so important?
Sure. So let me start off by saying, as a herbalist, I am not against the Ritalin and the Concerta and the Vivances and all those amazing, amazing medicines.
Mm,
Um, so I'm only half a tree hugger, I always joke. But with that, there are so many other things that we can do to enhance brain function.
mm,
And we start off with testing. If I can understand which foods are, for example, driving chronic inflammation in my body, I can cut those foods out of my body or out of my diet for a period of time and allow the body to go into a less hot state, so your chronic inflammation states. I can look at nutraceuticals or supplements, which are then things that we use to enhance brain function, to give the mitochondria more energy, to produce states of calm.
mm,
And all of these things are, of course, scientific. It's not just thumb suck and make things up as we go. There are studies that show all of these things. The most important and the most difficult is diet. And so I don't tell people you have to change your diet overnight.
mm,
Let's start with 1 day a week. We know that the neurodiverse brain does not like change, immediate change.
mm,
If we throw everything at it, it's going to be very much like a New Year's resolution, which lasts 1 week, 2 weeks, and then it's a waste. So slow incremental implementation is something that I feel very, very strongly about. And
mm.
then also the lifestyle changes itself, um, working with the subconscious, working with the brain rather than trying to push it into a specific area.
Mm. I mean, this is so interesting, just to also look at the diet side of things. And, as someone that obviously is an expert in this field, can you maybe mention some of the foods that can, contribute to, having ADHD, or, just for parents or caregivers to know exactly how they can go about changing the diet of their little ones, or, children that they're looking after?
The biggest one, biggest culprit is so big that it has a villain for itself. It's
Mm,
called sugar cube. Sugar is addictive. Sugar
mm,
drives what we call a leaky gut or a hyperpermeable gut. It
mm,
also drives chronic inflammation. And those things are at the root of most of our chronic disease states. It's not just ADD, ADHD,
mm,
your autoimmune disease and things like type 2 diabetes. They all share a leaky gut as one of the contributing factors. So that would be a big thing. Sugar, processed foods.
mm,
I say that the four curse words in my practice: gluten, dairy, sugar, processed foods.
mm. And now, doctor,
And
also,
then,
mm, yes, please do continue.
sorry,
No
and then
problem.
anything else that you might be intolerant to. And that's any food that we eat over and over and over again. It might even be a healthy food.
Mm,
I love dal, but I can't have too much of it because I will grow an intolerance to that.
mm, mm. That is very interesting, just to learn about the fact that, the diet or whatever it is that you put into your body has, I mean, contributes to your overall well-being. We hear it all the time, but I don't think we understand and put enough emphasis on this. But I want us to talk about, people that still consider ADHD as a disorder or deficit. How do you respond to this perspective, and how do you hope, to reframe the conversation about ADHD in a more positive manner?
I start off by asking the question, what is normal?
Mm,
Bring me one person that is not neurodiverse in some way or another. We all have our challenges. We all have our unique brains. And if we can get to that point where I can understand that my brain is as unique as anybody else's, then we can start working on letting go of the stigma of ADD and ADHD. Um, we can all do with help. And that is the approach that I would like to profess for people, is that rather than looking at what's wrong and fixing it, there's nothing to fix, but there's a lot that I can optimize. And that's what we focus on. You're not broken. We're not. A lot of times the kids come and see me, and I ask them, "Why are you here?" No, I don't know, because my parents brought me, and that oftentimes feel that they're in trouble, or they're coming to see yet another doctor because there's something wrong with them. And I start off with this thing of, you are not broken. We're not here to fix you. We are here to find out where you are strongest and where we can optimize your unique capabilities and strengths.
I mean, that is such a powerful way of looking at it because, a lot of times when people hear, or even parents that find out that their children have ADHD, they panic because immediately you think there's something wrong, it's a disorder, it's a deficit, which is something that's very sad. And I hope people like you and, the shows like these would continue to educate people so that they can know exactly, the ADHD, exactly what it means, and how it is to live with it. But I think one of the things that I want to cover just before we wrap up is, what do you think are the most, common misconceptions about ADHD, and what is a positive way of addressing them?
One of the biggest misconceptions is that ADHD is just a naughty child or a naughty person or a lazy person. It's not that. If the brain is tired, the brain is tired. And there are a lot of things on a nutraceutical point that we can do to optimize that. It's not laziness, it is not naughtiness, and it's also not just the way that it is. There is a lot that you can do to optimize your brain and to live a healthy life and a very happy one. Um, when you learn how to live with the brain rather than fighting against it the whole time, that's just exhausting.
Mm, mm. Most definitely. And just as we wrap up our conversation, Doctor, it is, I mean, October is ADHD Awareness Month. And with your expertise in this field, what do you think are the most crucial aspects of raising awareness on ADHD, and also breaking down the stigma around it, not only in children, but also in adults? Because I must say, for the longest of times, I used to think ADHD only existed in children until when I was growing up, and I was like, no, actually, there are adults who are also living with ADHD. And that's because we are so misinformed around the idea of ADHD. And the more obviously you interact with people, that's how you learn, about the realities of ADHD.
So, like I said earlier, and this is really important, ADD, ADHD are genetic in origin mostly. And so I never outgrow ADHD. I just learn how to live with it.
Mm,
And as we grow as adults, we just think, oh, I am a messy person, or
mm,
I am this kind of person that always needs to work under pressure. So we learn how to accept the negative, or sometimes even the positive, but a lot of the negative expressions. And that becomes part of who we are rather than something that we can focus on to change. And that's the message that I would like to share is, we can change the expression of the brain. We
mm.
can't change the genetics, but how it works, we can definitely optimize.
Mm. I mean, this has been such a wonderful conversation with you, Doctor, and thank you so much for your time and just for giving us, your advice and education, and for sharing a light on this very important topic.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great fun.
Thank you so much, viewers at home. That was Dr. Carel-Piet van Eeden, who is the holistic life counselor and herbalist, and he also specializes in attention deficit disorder. And we're also just covering his book, ADHD book, titled The Superhero Spectrum. Make sure that you do grab yourself a copy so that you can familiarize yourself with the realities of ADHD and stay educated. But on that note, viewers at home, it's time for us to head over to a quick break. We'll see you right after this.